Pleasant day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the principles of high quality assessment. And the principles which we are going to tackle for this session will be about validity and reliability, practicality, and efficiency. I am your presenter, Sir Jeff, and this is EDUC 106 course. Today, it is expected that at the end of the session, you'll be able to first cite evidence of validity and reliability in relation to assessment, and second, to describe how testing can be made more practical and efficient. So, we are going to study what we mean by assessment validity and reliability. It will be a session that will make you realize, or that will make us realize, what makes an assessment valid? What makes an assessment reliable? Aside from that, we will also tackle the different aspects that make an assessment practical and efficient. So, with this expected learning outcome or intended learning outcome, we shall have this following outline. So, as you can see on your screen, we shall have the first part which will be about validity and reliability with subtopics: letter A, content related evidence; criterion related evidence; and construct related evidence for validity; B, the unified concept of validity; letter C, validity of assessment methods; D, we are going to detail also on the threats to validity in order for us, of course, to avoid these threats and make our assessment highly valid. And last part will be about reliability. We shall have a session about its types, sources, measurement errors, and methods. Second part will be about the practicality and efficiency of assessment. So under this, we shall discuss the value of having the familiarity with the assessment method which we are going to use. Let it be the time required that teachers and learners should understand in order for them to accomplish creating on the part of the teacher, creating the assessment, and on the part of the learner to accomplish the assessment. Letter C is the ease of administration. Letter D, ease of interpretation. And last, of course, is the cost. And these are the references that I used in presenting the concepts in relation to those topics which we mentioned a while back. Now let's begin with validity and reliability, focusing on the content related evidence, criterion related evidence, and construct related evidence of validity. Now we have here on your screen the issue: comments and complaints from students regarding tests and other assessments, which is actually not unusual. So this comments and complaints that we hear from learners, from students who took an examination, are very usual reactions that we receive. Now, my personal stance about this one is that we should take this as a learning opportunity if we receive comments and complaints from our learners regarding the examination. But of course, we should filter which comment and complaints to accept and which one to reject, because definitely most students nowadays would say that when they are taking the test, they fear. Okay, the word test, it's like it brings fear to them. Now it's up to us to assess, and of course we need to seek the advice of other professionals, particularly our peers in the field of teaching, whether the assessment tool, the assessment method that we use is really appropriate, really practical, or really valid to be taken to be taken by this group of learners. Now let's define the term validity. Validity is a term derived from the Latin word validus, meaning strong. So, in view of assessment, we could state that it is deemed valid if it measures what is intended to be measured. Okay, so we refer that when we give assessment, in order to make it valid, it is always aligned with the intended learning outcome. Like what you have stated in your objective, what you have written in your objective is something that you measure in the end, or something that you are assessing all throughout the instruction. So that's what we mean by measuring what is intended to be measured. If assessment measures a student performance and knowledge with respect to the intended outcomes. Now, what are the sources of information in order for a teacher to ensure that an assessment is valid? Now, how do we establish validity? That's the big question now. Now, to answer that big question, we have the three. Uh, First, we have the content related evidence. Second, we have the criterion related evidence. Third, we have the construct related evidence. Let's begin discussing about content-related evidence. So this refers to the extent to which the test covers the entire domain of the content. So it's in layman's term, we could say that we should only assess what we taught our learners. If we taught about content letter A or content for week 1, then we should assess content for week 1. Do not assess something that we did not teach. So example for content related, to specify and to illustrate in this is when a teacher in grade 4 math tests learners using grade 4 math content not of grade 5 or grade 3. So it's very unusual and invalid to give examinations for grade 4 taking math classes, giving them examinations coming from grade 3 or coming from grade 5. Unless you are testing whether they are already advanced learners, that's why you are giving grade 5 assessment um, tests, or if you are just assessing whether they already acquired the skills when they were in grade 3. But if the topic that you have taught, the content that you have taught in a regular classroom setup, if the topic that you have taught is for grade 4, then you should assess based on their level. Assess them based on the grade 4 intended learning outcome. Okay, so I repeat, for content related evidence, very simple. Teach, when you teach something, that's what you are going to assess. Do not assess what you did not include in your instruction. So under this one, we have this terms face validity and instructional validity. When I say face validity, this means that a test that appears to be adequately appropriate. Okay, measure the learning outcomes and content. I repeat, face validity is a test that appears to adequately measure the learning outcomes and content. However, based on the word face, it looks superficial. Okay? It is superficial since it is not systematic and not scientific because this is based on subjective opinion. That's why its name is face. That's why we call it face, but validity. Okay. Now, in order to correct this one, okay, aside from your personal interpretation, there should be other sources of information that will establish the validity of an assessment. So first, aside from face validity, we have instructional validity. And this refers to the extent to which an assessment is systematically sensitive to the nature of instruction offered. So this refers to the amount, therefore, and the kind of instruction versus the test. So this talks about the inclusion of items that were not taught, yet they are required competencies. Okay? This reduces the instructional validity since learners have no knowledge on items or competencies that are being assessed. That's what we mean by instructional validity. I repeat, if it's face validity, we are talking about measuring the learning outcomes and the content. While for instructional validity, we are referring to assessment, okay, aligning it with the type of instruction, with the type of exposure, the kind of exposure that we gave our learners. So in order to check on this instructional validity and also on the content, we could have our table of specification. So a table of specification or TOS, okay, in the working place is a two-dimensional grid used to improve test validity. It's a test blueprint, in other words, okay? In this table of specification, which is done or constructed prior to the construction of an assessment tool, if it's a test paper, we construct first this table of specification. So this identifies the content, okay, and describes the learning outcomes at each level of cognitive domain. So later, I'll be showing you an example of table of specification. Again, the table of specification contains all of those elements. So the teacher will be guided when he or she writes or drafts the examination, the assessment tool, because you already have this what we call number of items that is required, okay, for a level of learning or a level of cognitive domain. For instance, since we have studied about Bloom's taxonomy of learning, there will be an equal distribution of these items, okay, of these test items, based on the number of days in which you have executed or you have taught this content. So later you will understand this better using our visual example. But for now, it's very important to remember about the six elements of table of specification development. So first is balance. Okay, we need to understand that when we create our task, there should be a balance. Where? A balance among the goals selected for each examination. Second, balance among the levels of learning, like for the lower order thinking skills versus the higher order thinking skills. Like if you are testing the level of difficulty of your examination, then you compare the number of items for the lower order thinking skills, the first three layers, okay, the first three parts or levels in the taxonomy for cognitive learning or cognitive domain for Bloom's taxonomy. We call it the lower order thinking skills. We have also the higher order thinking skills, which refers to the three highest levels of cognitive domain. Aside from balance or balancing among the levels of learning, it's also very important that we consider the test format. Like if it's a standardized test, like those standardized examination given by the Department of Education, crafted by, of course, by the expert, it's usually a multiple choice type of examination or assessment. Okay, but for some teacher-made tests, the test format could differ depending on the judgment of the teacher. Like we should match the test format that we are going to use to the type of content and to the type of learners that we have inside the classroom. And this is very evident if you're going to compare the assessment method for grades 1 to 3, 4, 5, 6, moving to high school and college, of course. There are more letters, okay, more words that you could see in the assessment tools used for college students and high school students, while for the elementary, speaking of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and kinder, there are the inclusion of pictures, okay, for them to have a grasp of what is being measured, okay, by their teacher. Aside from the test format, we also consider the total number of items, like is it too long? Is it too short? Well, are they going to have enough time if they are going to accomplish a 50 item multiple choice type of test? Okay, so these are considerations that we need to have when crafting or constructing assessment tools. Again, the fourth is the total number of items. Fifth, we have the number of items for each goal and levels of learning. Again, focusing on the table of specifications, like a balance among those levels of learning. Like for the levels of learning based on the revised Bloom's taxonomy. So there should be a balance among these levels. It's very difficult and complicated if you are going to group all the items, the 50 items under creating, unless for a very special purpose, then that could serve. Okay, that could be possible depending on the assessment of the teacher. Like if the skill or like if the content requires the learners to produce an output. So they really have to create. But I repeat, there should be this what we call balancing among the number of items, okay, the way we distribute them for each goal and levels of learning. Next is enabling skills to be selected from each goal framework. Now, when I say enabling skills, okay, selecting from each goal framework, this refers to the level of performance being achieved such as learning about declarative sentence, which is not only about defining it. It is also about constructing sentences orally and in written form. Consider that when you create your table of specification, is your focus more on defining, more on familiarizing, or would you like your learners to showcase? Would you like your learners to manifest the skill? So in that case, if we are talking about the declarative sentence, in order for that learner to show the skill in crafting or to show the skill in constructing declarative sentences, you may require the learner at the end of the test to write declarative sentences. So note that tests with huge percentage on higher order thinking skills. These are analysis, evaluation, and creation requires more time. This means if your test items or assessment items are grouped, okay, under those levels of cognitive domain, you should consider providing more time for the learners to answer or to accomplish the assessment given to them. Because if not, validity will suffer. Okay, not only if it's too difficult and then you provide only a limited time, okay? Validity could also suffer if the test is too short, okay, to sufficiently measure the behavior and cover the content. Like you have 1 month discussion about a particular content, then you will only have a 3 item test. That's very impossible. So it should be a balance. Now, talking about the standard of balancing, the answer to this is the table of specification. Like if you have a 50 item test, the table of specification would immediately answer how many items will be for subtopic A, will be for subtopic B. Okay, depending on the number of days, I repeat, that you have discussed or tackled the topic. Like if you tackle the topic for 10 days and you have 30 days in total. Therefore, that subtopic will be 30% of the overall item of that assessment. Thus, okay, our lesson here, teachers must decide on tests that students can finish on reasonable time. Because if it's too short, it becomes invalid because it will not sufficiently measure the behavior. If it's too long, it could be exhausting for the learners. So therefore, validity will suffer. So I repeat, remember these items you have on your screen: face validity and instructional validity in connection to the content related evidence. And of course, the table of specification. Now, for us to have an example about the table of specification, you would see on your screen an example of TOS, an example of table of specification. So you have this table. Okay, the first column discusses about or details about the chapter numbers. So chapter 1 to 5, chapter 6 to 10, chapter 11 to 15, chapter 16 to 20, chapter 21 to 25. So in total, according to this report, all of these chapters, okay, from 1 to 25 were tackled and discussed. executed by the teacher in 40 hours. And you have that hour distribution under the time frame. Like for chapter 1 to 5, it was delivered for 10 hours. Chapter 6 to 10 for 8 hours. Chapter 11 to 15 for 9 hours. Chapter 16 to 20 for 6 hours. Chapter 21 to 25 for 7 hours. And it's very simple to get the percentage. All you have to do is to divide the number of hours allotted or spent for each section. Like for chapter 1 to 5, you have 10 hours, then you divide 10 to 40 hours. So 10 over 40, the percentage that you will get is 25.25. So it's the same mathematical procedure which we are going to do to the rest of the chapters indicated here. So 8 divided by 40, that will become 20.20%. That's for chapter 6 to 10, and so on. Now, if you decided that the summative, for instance, we're talking about summative assessment. The summative assessment will be 50 items. All you have to do is to multiply, of course, the percentage to the total number of items, okay, for your examination. Therefore, we get that 25.25% of 50 items is 13. So it's a decision now that for chapters 1 to 5, you need to have 13 items. Okay, you would see that the roots, the decision of this allotment, okay, of 13 items, the chapter 1 to 5, depends on the allotted time frame for that particular chapter. So the more time we spend for a specific topic, the higher the chances that it will have higher number of items or huge number of items compared to the other chapter. Okay, now on the other side, you have the classifications of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you have 13 items, all you have to do is to distribute the 13 items, whether you're going to create an item test for knowledge, an item test for comprehension, for analysis, for synthesis. Based on this example, you have item 1, 3, 12, and 13 under knowledge. Item 2, 9, 11 under comprehension. Item 4, 5, 6, and 7 under analysis. Item 8 and 10 under synthesis. So all in all, if we are going to count these 13 items, okay, for chapter 1 to 5 were distributed among the four levels of cognitive domain based on Bloom's taxonomy. So this goes through the rest of the items. For chapter 6 to 10, you have 10 items. So 17 and 19 under knowledge, 14, 21, and 22 under comprehension. Item number 15, 16, 20, 23, and 18. Okay, you have analysis and synthesis. So this goes with the other chapters. So now, in order to test whether there is a balance among these levels of cognitive domain, okay, of Bloom's taxonomy, all you have to do is to add the number of items. So we can see that on this example task, that there are more items under knowledge. Okay, if we're going to count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 items under knowledge. There are no items under application. There are no items under evaluation. So based on the assessment of the teacher who made this one is some sort of a balanced table of specification. Now it's up to you whether to create an item for application or whether to create an item for evaluation. That's the decision making needed to be made by the teacher, because you know well your learners and you know well the other assessment methods, the other levels of cognitive domain which you already assessed prior to making this table of specification. So I repeat, this is an example of table of specification. Another example of table of specification. This one is not based on chapter. Okay, this is based on the instructional objectives. So you have the instructional objectives on the first column. and the number of days in which, or number of hours, not only the day, the number of hours or minutes in which this instructional objectives were executed. So, for example, for instructional objective 1, it was executed for 15 minutes. Okay, all in all, from instructional objective 1 to 12, the teacher spent 150 minutes, okay, for those instructional objectives. That is why the same procedure is to be followed as our example a while back. So 15 divided by 150, that will give you 10%. And 10% of the total 10 points, okay, for your assessment is 1 point. Okay, now the difference in this table of specification is that the teacher specified the type of test which he or she will give to the learners. Again, for this item under instructional objective number 1, the teacher will give a multiple choice type of assessment. Okay, so that goes for the rest of the example below. Okay, actually, there are more templates or format in terms of the table of specification. Now, it depends on your department or the school you are going to work with. Make sure you are familiar with the format, with the template, and understand that table of specification is really a requirement because not only it is a requirement, it is a guide for teachers to balance very well the content that they have taught to their learners and the assessment they are going to give. It's an injustice for us to give an assessment which is purely based on personal judgment, our personal judgment. There is always a basis for everything we do. So when you are assessing, do not forget your table of specification. Now, in terms of the time, okay, the time requirement to answer the assessment task, okay, on your screen, you would see the task items, okay, that demand higher order thinking skills. Obviously, as mentioned in our reference, this require more time to answer, okay? Whereas simple recall or the lower order thinking skills, they require lesser time compared to the items for higher order thinking skills. Now below, you would see the average response time for each assessment task. That's according to NITCO and Ricard in 2011. So for true or false, otherwise known as alternate response, time required to answer, that's 20 to 30 seconds per item. For modified true or false, 30 to 45 seconds. Sentence completion or one word fill in, that's 40 to 60 seconds. Multiple choice with four responses, okay, lower level, that's 40 to 60 seconds also. Multiple choice, higher level, okay, this requires a bit of analysis. Okay, should I say a bit or more of analysis of a situation analysis. This needs 70 to 90 seconds per item. Matching type, 5 items, or with 6 choices, 2 to 4 minutes. Short answer, 2 to 4 minutes. Multiple choice with calculations, 2 to 5 minutes. This actually applies among, especially among accounting students. Okay, like when I would serve as a proctor to accounting students, there are only 30 items, but it takes them sometimes, or most of the time, more than 1 hour to accomplish because there are calculations. So it doesn't mean you are using multiple choice type of test or multiple choice type of assessment, it's automatically 60 seconds. No, it depends on the nature of the STEM or the item. Okay, it depends also on the nature of the distractors or the choices. Next, we have word problems. Next, we have word problems or simple arithmetic. That's 5 to 10 minutes. Short essays, 15 to 20 minutes. Data analysis with graphing, 15 to 25 minutes. drawing models and labeling 20 to 30 minutes, extended essays, not the restricted one, that's 35 to 50 minutes. So we should consider this time requirement if you're going to use a specific type of test question so that there will be enough time for the learners to answer your assessment, and that will make your assessment valid because it was delivered, administered using appropriate time frame. Aside from the content related evidence for validity, we have the criterion related evidence. This refers to the degree to which the test scores agree with an external criterion. What do we mean by this external criterion? So when say external criterion, we are referring, of course,